Okay, 1, 2, 3. We're about to start our live stream today, and the topic is going to be describing pie charts in IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. So I think it's going to take about 1 more minute for people to get together and to join the live stream, and we're about to start. So I just want to to make sure that everything is fine, that the live stream is working. It looks like it's working. Uh, if you can hear me clearly, just please put a plus in the chat box, and then we will start. Sorry for a small delay. I was just sending notifications about the live stream. Okay, let me check myself. Yeah, okay. So I can hear myself, which means that there are 7 people who are watching so far at the moment. Could you please put pluses in the chat box that you can hear me clearly, and we will start. So once again, today we're going to describe to learn to describe pie charts and static data in IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. So a task that we're going to deal with is going to be the following. So look at these wonderful pie charts. And the task is, the charts below show the percentage of water used for different purposes in 6 areas of the world. And then the task itself is always the same. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Paulina, Anastasia, Evgeny, Sabina, Sinara, and Sabina, Karina. So thank you all. There is a delay of about 30 seconds. So I'll be looking in the chat box sometime. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And also, I will be asking you questions. So please try to give you answers. We'll also practice writing introductions today and overviews, maybe some other parts. So this pie charts deals with the percentage of water which is used for different purposes in 6 areas of the world. And like any academic writing task 1, static data description or pie charts description consists of 3 main parts. That's the introduction, the overview, and then detailed paragraphs. So our introduction, basically, in our introduction, we need to paraphrase the task. So it says the charts below show the percentage of water used for different purposes in 6 areas of the world. But we can also include some information from the description, for example, industrial use, agricultural use, and domestic use. And then we can put it here. Instead of saying different purposes, we can say for industrial, agricultural, and domestic purposes, or for industrial, agricultural, and domestic use. All right, so here you have the task itself. We don't need the pie charts yet. And if you want to include the purposes in your introduction, you can also do that. All right, so let's say I will give you 2 minutes. I will time 2 minutes. And during these 2 minutes, please try to write an introduction and just write it in the chat box. If you want me to give you feedback and maybe you can improve it somehow. If I find a way, I will tell you. Right, so 2 minutes. Okay, now 1 minute has passed and we still have 1 more minute left. Okay, so there can be some delay. And if there is, then, well, I will come back to your chat box. I will just, in the meantime, I will show you my sample answer. And then if some of you write your introduction in the chat box, then I'll come back and check it. So here's an example. The 6 pie charts illustrate the proportion of water usage for industrial, agricultural, and domestic purposes in 6 regions of the world. Okay, here's an example. So you have these keywords, like, what does the task say again? It says percentage of water used. So if you want to paraphrase this noun phrase, water used, you can say water usage, water use, the amount of water which is used, or water consumption, the consumption of water, the amount of water which is consumed. So there are many ways of how we can paraphrase this. The charts below, you can say, well, the given charts, or given are the charts which illustrate or which show the percentage. Percentage you can paraphrase as proportion of what, for various purposes, in 6 areas of the world. I don't think it's a good idea to include all the 6 areas here. Okay, so Karina, the charts reveal the ways water is used in different areas throughout the world. Okay, I think you need to specify how many areas, and there are 6 areas, so probably it's a good idea to include this number. Then the ways of how water is used, because if you say the ways water is used, it sounds a little bit too spoken for academic style, but your introduction does not have any mistakes. That's fine. So just a few improvements or possible suggestions. So if you are still writing your introduction, feel free to include it at any time during the live stream today, or even after the live stream, you can write it in the commentaries. I will check it. So, but please do it within a week, like probably not later than 25th of July. All right, so we've done the introduction. Again, I will come back. If somebody has written the introduction in the chat box, I will come back and check it. Now, the next part is the overview. In the overview, well, there are 3 elements. 2 of them are, well, necessary, and the middle one is kind of optional. So you start with a linking word, and then you can say, for example, overall or in general. Usually we use overall. And then you can say something like, it can be seen that, but this is the easiest expression which you can use. And then you think of some contrasting trends. Usually there are 2. In most cases, they're contrasting trends. While something is something, comma, something else is something else. And so you use a clause of concession here. Instead, after overall, instead of it can be seen that, you can also say, well, for example, like a cursory glance at the charts reveals that, or you can use some other collocations, like it is glaringly obvious that, it is patently obvious that, it is blindingly obvious that, or it is abundantly clear that, or it is conspicuous that, so that you use some interesting collocations or advanced words or expressions. And then while you talk about the main trend, and then the second one. In some rare cases, these cases are really rare when you have 2 similar trends. So you can say not only is something something with inversion, but something else is something else. Yeah, so then in these cases, you can do that. But here we'll have contrasting trends. So I will, okay, I'll just show you the whole task so that you can write your overview. I'll give you also maybe 3 minutes. And in the meantime, I will look back in the chat box. And see if somebody else has written. Okay, so Volko V, sorry, don't know your name, I just the nickname. The provided pie chart, there are 6 of them, so pie charts depicts, so the pie charts depict the proportion of water usage, domestic, agricultural, and industrial, in 6 different regions all around the globe. Okay, that's fine. So if somebody else wants to write any other introductions, then feel free to include them. And feel free to write them in the chat box. And now I'll give you, well, let's try 3 minutes. I'll set the timer, 3 minutes, and try to write an overview. So in your overview, so you write overall and some kind of an expression, like it can be seen that or some synonym, while one trend, comma, another trend. It's just one sentence. You have 3 minutes for this. Okay, now there is 1 minute left. We're describing the overview. We're writing the overview. Basically, here you can see that in many countries like South America, Africa, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia, the most popular water usage is in the agricultural sector. However, in North America and Europe, the predominant water usage is industrial. And these are our 2 main trends. So this is what you're supposed to describe. So your overview can be something like overall, a cursory glance at the charts reveals that while in North America and Europe, industrial use is the most popular, comma, in the remaining 4 areas, it is agricultural use that is predominant. Okay, so here is a sample overview. Overall, a cursory glance at the pie charts reveals that while in North America and Europe, then you can also edit, but it's not necessary, which can be said to comprise the developed world. The most popular water use is in industry, comma. In the remaining 4 regions, it is agricultural use that is predominant. All right. And this is probably the best overview. I mean, the idea itself is the best overview you can write for this particular pie chart. So while in these two areas it is industrial use, in the remaining four regions it is agricultural use. However, you can be even more general in your overview. I'm not saying it is better, it's just possible. You can write something like, overall, it can be clearly seen from the provided data that in North America and Europe, which can be said to comprise the developed world, the patterns of water use are very similar, whereas in the undeveloped regions, there are a variety of water distribution patterns. But then you will still have to say about agricultural use and industrial use in two main body paragraphs. So a better version is this one about, while in this area it's this type of water consumption purpose. In the other four regions, it's something else. Okay. Okay. Now my comment is too long. YouTube removed it. Let me correct it quickly. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that it was impossible to post longer commentaries. So just in case, save it. I mean, copy paste it when you're sending it, and then maybe you can post it in parts. So don't include any links because YouTube will not allow you to do that. All right. So if you're still writing your introduction or overview, you can post them at any time during the live stream today. I look at the chat box from time to time, and I will give you my commentaries. So moving on to detailed paragraphs. It is a language exam, and our task is not to copy these percentages like 48, 39, 13 into our description, but instead it would be a very good idea to paraphrase these percentages with using language. For example, here you can see 48%, and you can just say almost a half, or for example 39%. So 20%, that's 1/5, and 39%, that's 40%, that's 2/5, and 39%, it means almost 2/5, or for example 19%, almost 1/5, 10%, 1/10, 71%. So if 75%, that's 3/4, then you can say almost 3/4, or you can just say just over a half, or you can also say like almost a third or almost 1/3, about 32%, and so on. So there is very often there is a way to just to paraphrase these percentages and to express them using language, describe them as fractions. So here are some examples of how you can paraphrase different percentages for your detailed paragraphs. For example, 4%, it could be 3% also, a tiny fraction. You can even say also a tiny fraction of 4%. 20%, 1/5, 24%, almost a quarter, 25%, exactly a quarter or 1/4, 26%, roughly a quarter, 32%, nearly 1/3, nearly a third, almost a third, 49%, around a half, just under a half, 50%, exactly a half, 51%, just over a half, 73%, nearly 3/4, or just under 3/4, 77%, it's approximately 3/4 or more than 3/4, 79%, well over 3/4, so just under 4/5. All right. Okay, let me look in the chat box. Yes, okay, Karina. Overall, it is glaringly obvious that while usage of water, the usage of water, if you put of after the noun, there should be, in most cases, there should be article there before it. The usage of water in most of the shown areas, because you're talking about these particular areas, is considered to be mostly concentrated for agricultural purposes, comma. The percentage of water used for industrial purposes is dominant in Europe and North America. Okay, well done. Yes. All right. So coming back to fractions. So when you're writing your detailed paragraph, you can paraphrase many of the percentages. You can paraphrase them as fractions, but you can also give more general descriptions of these proportions or percentages. For example, for about 2% or 3% or 4%, you can say a tiny portion, like a tiny portion of 2%, or a very small proportion of 2%, or you can say an insignificant minority of 4%. It would be a good idea to keep the number, an insignificant minority of 4%, an insignificant proportion of 4%, 16%, that's a small minority or a small portion, 70%, a large proportion of 70, 75, 65, a significant majority of 72%, or a significant proportion of 72%, a very large proportion of 89%. Then if you're writing about countable nouns, you cannot use it in our task today because water is uncountable, and you cannot use this language that we're going to look at now, but you can use it if something is countable, like 1 in 10, or 1 out of 5, or 2 out of 5, or every other, like every other person or class. But no, you cannot say every other water, it doesn't make sense. All right. So yeah, that's the kind of language you can use. You can also use comparative proportions, like half as much again as, or half as much as. So these are also really nice expressions. They're quite old, classical, but you can also include them in your description. So then very often you want to say that something is about a half, right? So what are some of the synonyms for about a half? So, and maybe you will need to use these expressions, let's say 5 times in your task 1. Who knows, some 3, 4, or 5 times. So let's think of 3, 4, or 5 synonyms for the word about, or approximately. There seems to be a delay of about 30 seconds. That is fine. So as soon as you see the question, try to type your answers in the chat box. Like, okay, about or approximately. Okay, so my options are approximately, nearly, roughly. So I call this the rule of 3 A's. So how you can memorize this, it's about, around, approximately. But you can also say like approximately, nearly, roughly, around, about, more or less, somewhere in the vicinity of, just about, just around, almost, just under, just below, a little less than, just over, a little more than. So if you see that it's 48%, instead of saying approximately a half, maybe it would be better to say just under a half, because you'll be more precise by saying just under when it's 48 and not 50, instead of just saying approximately. Yeah, so just an idea. Okay, now I can see nearly, yes, roughly. Karina, hardly. I wouldn't use it as a synonym for about, around, or approximately. Okay. So then you could say something like, the consumption of water in Africa for industrial use is 15%. So what are some synonyms for this is? What are some clever words for is? Like the consumption of water is 15%. What else can you say? Most likely you will need to use 5 or 6 different synonyms. Let's try to brainstorm. What can we say here? I'll give you like around 30 seconds. Okay, yeah, I can see approximately, about, nearly, roughly, more or less. Yes, that's right. Okay, constitute. That's a good word. That's the best one. The consumption of water for agricultural purposes in Africa constitutes 15% or 20%. Yeah, that's a good one. Any other? Okay, you can be typing them. So here's my list. So constitutes, stands at, amounts to, makes up, totals, accounts for, right? It's a good idea to know all these 6 words, just in case you want to use 6 different, 6 different times you want to say the consumption of water for this purpose in this area is this, constitutes. Then next time you say stands at, next time you say amounts to, after this makes up, then totals or accounts for. All right. Forms a tiny portion, accounts for. Okay, Paulina, yes, you can also say. I would still say constitutes, not forms. No, probably it doesn't sound very nice. I wouldn't say that. But constitutes, that's the best one. And there are some synonyms as well. Now, what else do we need for? You could say, for example, the consumption of water in Africa and America constitutes 25 and 30%. What's the word that you use at the end after? So yes, the word is respectively. Yeah, so the consumption of water in Africa and America for agricultural use, for example, constitutes 20 and 25% respectively. Another way of saying this is to use words like the former and the latter. So you can say the consumption of water for this or that purpose in Africa and America is 20% for the former and 35% for the latter. It will mean that 20% is for Africa and 35% is for America. Yes, it is 25% for the former and 35% for the latter. With former and latter, you can only use 2 numbers. With respectively, you can use 3 numbers easily. So the consumption of water in Africa, America, and Southeast Asia constitutes 25, 35, and 45% respectively. Yes, you can do that. But with former and latter, you can only use 2 numbers. Right. Then another thing which you cannot find it in many sources. Another thing that you can use to increase your score in lexical resource is to use advanced adjectives to describe big numbers or small numbers. So if you, for example, if you have a very small number like 2, 3% or 5%, you can say the consumption of water for this purpose constitutes a negligible 5%, a scanty 5%, a minuscule 5%, a paltry 5%, a meager 5%, or an infinitesimal 5%. All these words are super advanced. If you use them in your academic writing task 1 with small numbers, just maybe percentages or maybe just some insignificant, really insignificant numbers. So these words are really advanced. Okay, Paulina, respectively. Yes, that's true. That's right. So these adjectives can help you increase your score in lexical resource. Then if the number is small but not so small as 2, 3, 5%, let's say 10 or 15%, there are some other words that you can say like a tiny 10%, a modest 10%, a humble 15%. These words are not so advanced, but you can still use them, or an insignificant 8%. Also, please pay attention that 5% is kind of plural, or you can say, let's say the population is 500 people. So this is kind of plural. If you use an adjective, you put indefinite article a before the adjective. So you will say it constitutes, well, the population constitutes a negligible 500 people. Maybe it was like in some case, or a minuscule 500 people. It will just mean that is a very small number, surprisingly small number, and you put a before this plural noun. It's an exception. It's something similar to word another, which is only used in singular, but you can say, give me another 5 minutes. 5 minutes is plural, another is used only in singular, but you can still use them together. And same thing here. Now, if you're describing a very big number, then you can also say a whopping 90%, a staggering 95%, a hefty 95%. Whopping, staggering, and hefty are really advanced. There is one problem. For example, whopping is really advanced, but it is a little bit too spoken, so be careful with it. I mean, if you're somewhere around band 6 or 6.5, this can be one of the many different small things that can help you score a 7. Well, let's talk about lexical resource for now. But if you're, for example, 7 plus, and you're using whopping, stylistically it's not appropriate. And if you use maybe whopping and a couple of 1 or 2 more content words from spoken or informal register, then you limit yourself to band 7 in lexical resource if you're not using advanced lexical items with some awareness of style and collocation. But staggering is more neutral. Then if the number is big but not so big, then you can also say a substantial 75%, a sizable 75%, or a massive 75%. Okay, so these are the words that you can use with big or small numbers. If you are a fan of including some invented statistics in your IELTS essay, then you can also use this language there. And you can say something. If you do that, I mean, I do not encourage you, but if you include some invented statistics in your essays and to support your explanations, then you can write something, and you write something to exemplify according to a recent survey which was conducted by British scientists who are very popular in Russia. I'll say a staggering 95% of respondents said that. Then the word staggering will help you. I mean, not just the word, one word, but it's one of the ways to increase your score a little bit in lexical resource in an essay too. So you can use this language about change in your essays, or also in your speaking when you're describing change, or when you can also include some statistics too in your part 3 answers. All right, so now let's have a look at a sample answer. This is the description of our task today. So the 6 pie charts illustrate the proportion of water usage for industrial, agricultural, and domestic purposes in 6 regions of the world. Overall, it can be clearly seen from the provided data that in North America and Europe, which can be said to comprise the developed world, the patterns of water use are very similar, whereas in the undeveloped regions, there are a variety of water distribution patterns. And I just forgot to change it, but as I've mentioned, it would be better to say while in North America and Europe, it is industrial use that is most popular, than in the remaining 4 regions, it is agricultural use that is predominant, or something like this. Then in North America and Europe, the primary use for water is in industry. So if you do not do this in the overview, you need to start it here. With industrial use comprising half of these regions' water consumption, this is followed by agricultural use, which constitutes approximately 1/3 of the water. In contrast, or on the contrary, or even conversely, domestic use of water is a relatively small part of the entire water consumption of these regions, at just 13 and 15% respectively. In the remaining 4 regions, agricultural use of water is predominant, making up roughly 4/5 of the total water used. In contrast, or conversely, no more than a meager 12% of water is used for industrial purposes in these 4 regions, and only South America has more than 1/10 of its water marked for domestic use. Thus, they stand in stark contrast to North America and Europe. All right, this is a sample answer. And as you remember, our task is summarize the information. So we need to write our overview. Some people also include a summary at the end. We will not discuss it today. whether we need it or not. Um, then summarize information by selecting and reporting the main features. So the main features will be the biggest and the smallest numbers. So we need to include the biggest and the smallest numbers in our description. And make comparisons where relevant. So we also need to make comparisons. And my question is, how can we make comparisons? What are some of the ways of how you can make comparisons in academic writing task 1? So could you just try to give some examples? All right, so here's my list of 8 different ways how you can make comparisons in your writing. One of them is to use contrast clauses or clauses of concession. While, yeah, while, whereas, although, or much as. Much as is an uncommon synonym for although. So while, for example, in America is this, in Africa is this. This is a way to make a comparison. Then on the one hand, on the other hand, you can use some linking words for comparing things. Yeah, on the one hand, on the other hand. If there is a difference, you can also say in contrast, or in stark, or in sharp contrast to this, or conversely, or on the contrary. Then if something is similar, it's also comparison. You can say similarly or likewise. You're also comparing it. Then you can use the former or the latter. We discussed this. You can use the word respectively. We also talked about this. And 2 last methods are the most obvious. You can use comparative adjectives or adverbs and superlative adjectives or adverbs. But instead of saying it's bigger, it's smaller, it's the biggest, it's the smallest, you can also say it's much bigger, or it's better if you say significantly or considerably bigger, or slightly bigger, or something like this. Then you can say, you can use expressions like it's nowhere near as popular as something else. Or it's, instead of saying this the most popular, you can say it is by far the most popular. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, we're going to finish quite soon. So if you have any questions about today's live stream, please ask your questions in the chat box. But I'm also going to give you a bit of information. I want you to write your commentaries. I mean, if you have any. So one more thing that I want to share with you. When you start a new category, a new description in your academic writing task 1, there are some useful linking words when you want to move from one category to another. So you can say, with regards to agricultural water use, or as for, or turning to, or focusing on. There are some others, but well, these 4 are my favorite. All right, and I think that's all I wanted to say. Like, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. I'll give you just 1 more minute. And yes, for everyone who wants to get my feedback, just for 1 week, I offer everyone a free essay correction service. So you can write your description of these pie charts after watching the live stream. You can do this task, write the introduction, overview, and detailed paragraphs, and post them in the commentaries under the video, and I will correct all the mistakes and will rewrite it in a more natural way. You can see some examples. They were done in the last stream There were 2 people who posted their commentaries and they received their feedback. You can look at it and you can do the same, but please do it before the 25th of July. So before next Monday. Yes. All right. So thank you all for participation. It was my pleasure to share this information with you and hope to see you in the next live stream. No, Karina, I couldn't see your essay. I could only see your overview and I give you my commentaries about the overview. So you can just listen again. Overall, it is glaring the obvious that, well, the usage of water in most of the shown areas is considered to be mostly concentrated for agricultural purposes, the percentage of water used for industrial purposes is dominant in Europe and North America. I didn't see anything else except for the overview, and I gave my commentaries for the overview. You can just watch this live stream again after it is finished. Or just send me an email if you wrote something else that YouTube blocked, then I will give you my commentaries about this. Okay, thanks again for your participation and see you in the next live stream or in the next class if you're my student. For the previous video, I will have a look. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you next time.